Here is something nobody prepares you for. After 60, the things that bother you are rarely the big things. You've already proven you can survive the big things. What wears you down is the accumulation of small disturbances. The comment that replays, the slight you can't shake, the low hum of worry about things that haven't happened, the sense that peace is always slightly out of reach. That experience has a name in Buddhist teaching, and more importantly, it has an end. Not the end that comes from everything finally going smoothly, because that end never arrives, but the end that comes from understanding the mechanism behind disturbance so clearly that it loses its grip on you entirely. Today, at Mindfulness, we're going into the heart of what Buddhist wisdom teaches about rebuilding after 60. 8 areas of your inner life, from how you hold your identity to how you relate to silence, each one a doorway into the kind of steadiness that your years have already been preparing you for without you knowing it. 1. The turning point nobody talks about. There's a moment that happens after 60 that most people misunderstand. The world starts to feel different. Things that used to excite you begin to feel hollow. Noise that once seemed important now feels exhausting. Some people panic when this happens. They think something is wrong with them. They try to recreate the drive they had at 40, the hunger they had at 30. But in Buddhist understanding, this shift isn't a loss, it's an arrival. The Pali Canon, one of the earliest recorded collections of Buddhist teachings, describes human life as moving through distinct phases of understanding. In the earlier phases, the mind reaches outward. It grasps, it compares, it builds. This is natural. This is how life unfolds. But there comes a point, described in the teachings as a deepening of insight, where the mind begins to turn inward, not out of defeat, but out of genuine wisdom beginning to ripen. After 60, many people experience this turning without having a name for it. You stop wanting to prove yourself. You stop needing the last word. You find yourself less interested in being right and more interested in being at rest. This isn't giving up. In Buddhist terms, this is the beginning of genuine renunciation. Not the kind that requires leaving your home or shaving your head, but the quiet inner renunciation of what never truly satisfied you anyway. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from clinging, and one of the subtlest forms of clinging is clinging to a version of yourself that the years have naturally outgrown. After 60, life is offering you an invitation most people refuse. To stop pretending you are still building toward something and start recognizing that the ground beneath you, this very moment, is where the peace you've been looking for actually lives. The turning point isn't a crisis, it's a doorway. And the fact that you're here listening to this suggests some part of you already senses that. 2. What Buddhist teachings actually say about aging. There is a discourse in the Pali Canon where the Buddha speaks directly about aging. He doesn't soften it. He doesn't turn it into a motivational message. He looks at aging clearly, honestly, and says something radical. The one who understands impermanence is not disturbed by what is impermanent. Buddhism draws a clear line between 2 kinds of pain. The first is the natural discomfort that comes from living in a physical body in a changing world. Things wear out, bodies slow down, people leave. This kind of pain is woven into existence, and the teachings never pretend otherwise. The second kind of pain is the suffering we add on top of that, the resistance, the argument with what is. The story we build around every difficulty that says this shouldn't be happening, I shouldn't feel this way, life has failed me. Buddhist teachings point to that second layer as the one we actually have power over. After 60, the body sends messages that are harder to ignore. And for many people, those messages trigger fear, grief, or a quiet desperation. The Buddhist response isn't to silence those feelings, it's to meet them without adding the second layer. To feel the grief without building a story that life is over. To feel the physical changes without concluding that you are now less than you were. There is a teaching in early Buddhism called the contemplation of the body, where practitioners are encouraged to see the body clearly, not as something shameful, but as something natural, changing, and ultimately not the core of what you are. This contemplation isn't morbid. When practiced with gentleness, it loosens the grip of the fear that aging triggers and replaces it with something surprisingly peaceful, honest acceptance. You are not declining, you are changing. And within that change, if you look carefully, there is a freedom that younger years rarely offer. 3. Releasing what other people think of you. At some point in life, the weight of other people's opinions becomes unbearable. Not because people are crueler than before, but because you've spent so many decades carrying their judgments, their expectations, their disappointments, and you are simply tired. Buddhism has a concept called the 8 worldly concerns. These are described in classical texts as the forces that keep ordinary minds in a constant state of agitation. They come in 4 pairs: gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and obscurity. The teaching says that most human suffering isn't caused by life itself, but by our relentless chasing of one side of these pairs and our terror of the other. Praise feels necessary. Blame feels unbearable. Being seen feels essential. Being overlooked feels like erasure. After 60, you have lived through enough cycles of all of these to know something important. None of them lasted. The praise came and went. The criticism stung and then faded. The recognition felt good and then left you wanting more. And the times you were overlooked, while painful, didn't actually end you. The Buddhist path to freedom from the 8 worldly concerns isn't about becoming someone who doesn't care about anything. It's about developing what the teachings call equanimity. It doesn't mean flatness or indifference. It means a stable ground inside you that doesn't collapse when the wind changes. When someone criticizes you, equanimity doesn't say it doesn't hurt. It says the hurt doesn't have to rewrite your sense of who you are. When someone overlooks you, equanimity doesn't pretend that's comfortable. It says your worth was never stored in their attention to begin with. After 60, you have earned the right to put this weight down, not through bitterness, but through the clear-eyed recognition that what others think of you has never determined your actual value. The Buddhist teachings confirm this, not as comfort, but as fact. 4. The practice of letting things pass. One of the most misrepresented ideas in popular Buddhist content is the idea of letting go. It gets spoken about as if it's a decision you make once, a moment where you simply drop what's been hurting you and walk forward lighter. But that's not what the teachings describe. In Buddhist practice, letting go is not an event. It's a training. The Pali term most closely associated with this is upekkha, often translated as equanimity or letting be. It appears repeatedly in foundational Buddhist texts as one of the 4 Brahma Viharas, the 4 qualities of heart that the Buddha taught as central to genuine liberation. And unlike how it's sometimes portrayed, upekkha isn't passive. It's an active, cultivated quality of non-grasping and non-resistance that takes consistent inner work to develop. Here's what this means practically. When something difficult happens, the untrained mind grabs it. It holds it, turns it over, builds a story around it, relives it, projects it into the future. This is grasping in real time, and every moment of grasping adds weight. The training of upekkha begins with something small. You notice when the mind grabs onto something. You don't shame yourself for it. You simply notice, and then gently you practice not feeding it more attention than the moment requires. After 60, you've had enough experience to recognize this pattern in yourself. You know what it feels like to replay a conversation for days. You know what it feels like to let worry about a future event colonize your present. You've seen firsthand how little all that replaying and projecting actually changed the outcome. The Buddhist path doesn't ask you to stop feeling. It asks you to stop feeding. Feel what arises, meet it with honesty, and then practice releasing the grip, not by forcing the feeling away, but by choosing again and again not to build a residence inside the mind for what was always meant to pass through. This is the quiet daily practice that, over months and years, genuinely rebuilds how you meet life. 5. Rebuilding your relationship with silence. Most people are afraid of silence. Not the silence outside, but the silence inside. When everything quiets down, something uncomfortable surfaces. Old regrets, unanswered questions, the accumulated weight of years lived at full speed. And so people fill the silence with noise, with busyness, with anything that keeps that deeper confrontation at bay. Buddhist practice treats silence not as emptiness, but as the natural environment of clarity. In the early Buddhist texts, the quality of stillness cultivated through meditation is not described as blank or vacant. It is described as luminous, aware, and deeply restful. The Pali word for this quality of alert stillness is samadhi, which doesn't translate perfectly into English, but points to a mind that is collected, unified, and no longer scattered across 100 different concerns. You don't need to become a meditator to access this, but you do need to stop treating silence as something to survive. After 60, your relationship with silence can change fundamentally. The years have given you something the young rarely have, a genuine tiredness with distraction. There's a natural readiness, if you allow it, to stop running from the quiet and start inhabiting it. The practice is gradual. It begins with small moments, sitting without a screen, walking without filling your ears, eating a meal without commentary or entertainment, not as discipline, but as an experiment in discovering what lives beneath the noise. What many people find when they stop fleeing silence is that it isn't frightening at all. It is, as the Buddhist texts suggest, the ground state of a mind that isn't fighting itself. The regrets don't disappear in silence, but they lose their stranglehold. The unanswered questions don't resolve, but they stop feeling like emergencies. After a lifetime of noise, silence isn't something to be afraid of. It might be the most nourishing thing you've never allowed yourself. 6. Why compassion toward yourself changes everything. There is a teaching in early Buddhism about a quality called metta, usually translated as loving kindness. In the foundational text that describes this practice, meditators are instructed to extend this quality of warmth and goodwill in a specific sequence. It begins with oneself. This is not self-indulgence. The Buddhist logic is precise. A person who has no genuine warmth toward themselves cannot offer real warmth to others. What they offer instead is performance, or they give until empty and then collapse into resentment. True compassion has to have a living root in one's own heart before it can genuinely reach outward. For many people over 60, self-compassion is the hardest practice of all. You've had decades to accumulate a list of your failures. Decisions you'd make differently, relationships you didn't handle well, time you feel you wasted, versions of yourself you're not proud of. And many people carry all of this in silence, with a quiet harshness toward themselves that never gets examined. Buddhism does not ask you to pretend those things didn't happen. It does not offer easy absolution or manufactured positivity. What it offers is something more honest and more lasting. The recognition that every harmful action you ever took arose from confusion, not from a corrupt core self. The Buddha's teaching on the nature of mind is consistent across canonical texts. The mind's natural state is not evil. What causes harm is ignorance, craving, and aversion. And all three are conditions that arose, and all three are conditions that can be understood and released. You were doing what you knew how to do with what you had at the time. That is true for you. It was true for every person who ever hurt you as well. This is where the compassion practice becomes genuinely rebuilding. When you stop punishing yourself for who you were and start meeting who you are now with honest kindness, something shifts at a foundational level. The harshness that you turned inward loses its grip, and as it does, the harshness you felt toward others often quietly loosens as well. 7. The teaching on what remains when everything falls away. There is a question that aging brings to the surface whether you invite it or not. When the roles you played are no longer required, when the identity you built through decades of work and relationship and achievement begins to thin, when the body changes and the world around you shifts, what remains? Who are you when everything you used to define yourself by is no longer available as a reference point? This is not a crisis question. In Buddhist understanding, it is one of the most important questions a human life can generate. The Buddha addressed the question of identity directly and repeatedly throughout his teachings. He described the human tendency to build a fixed sense of self around 5 changing processes: physical form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These 5, called the khandhas in Pali, are always in motion. They are never stable, never truly graspable, and yet the ordinary mind insists on treating them as the solid foundation of who we are. The suffering this causes is not abstract. When your body changes, if you've identified completely with your body, you experience that change as a loss of self. When your career ends, if your sense of worth lived entirely in your role, the retirement can feel like a kind of death. When relationships shift, if your identity was constructed entirely through being needed, the change hollows you out. Buddhist teaching doesn't say these changes aren't painful. It says the pain is magnified enormously by the insistence that these changing things are what you fundamentally are. What the teachings point toward instead is something that the texts describe with careful precision rather than romantic vagueness. It is awareness itself. the simple, undecorated capacity to know experience as it arises and passes. Not a soul in the theological sense, not an eternal fixed entity, but the living presence of knowing that underlies every moment of your life, that was present when you were 5 years old, that is present now, and that is not diminished by any of the changes that have occurred in between. After 60, this teaching lands differently than it would have at 30. You have already lived enough to have watched many things you thought were permanent simply dissolve. The job ended. The children grew and became their own people. The friends, in some cases, are gone. And yet something in you continued. Something watched all of it. Something remains right now, reading these words, aware, present, unchanged at the core, even as everything around it and within it shifted. That is what Buddhist practice is pointing at. Not a concept to believe in, but a living reality to recognize directly in your own experience. And when you begin to rest your identity there, in awareness itself, rather than in the changing contents of awareness, the things that used to shake you simply lose their power. Not because life becomes easier, but because you stop being identical with the parts of life that were always going to change. This is the rebuilding that Buddhism offers after 60, not reconstruction of the old, but recognition of what was never broken. 8. Living the rest of your life from a different ground. There is a passage in the Dhammapada, one of the most widely translated texts in the Pali Canon, that describes the person who has genuinely understood the nature of mind. It says, in essence, that such a person moves through the world like water moving through sand, without forcing, without resistance, finding the path of least conflict, not through passivity, but through deep alignment with what is actually true. This is not a description of a monk in a monastery. It is a description of an inner orientation that is available to anyone willing to do the honest, patient work of understanding their own mind. After 60, you are in one of the most powerful positions of your entire life for this kind of work. Not because life is simpler, but because you are finally, if you choose to be, done pretending. The pretending takes many forms. Pretending that busyness equals meaning. Pretending that being needed equals being valued. Pretending that constant forward motion is the same as living fully. Pretending that peace is something you'll get to later, after things settle down, after the grandchildren are older, after one more problem is solved. Buddhism is very clear on this point across multiple canonical texts. Later is a story the mind tells to avoid the intimacy of now. The present moment is not a waiting room for a better moment. It is the only place where life is actually occurring. Living from a different ground means beginning each day not with a list of what needs to be fixed, but with a brief, honest recognition of what is already whole. Your breath moving without effort. Awareness present without being summoned. The simple fact of being here, which is not a small thing. It means when difficulty arises, and it will, meeting it with the question the Buddhist teachings implicitly ask: is this situation genuinely requiring my response right now? Or is this my mind adding suffering to something that simply is what it is? It means extending to the people in your life the same recognition you are beginning to offer yourself, that they too are doing the best they can from where they are, that their limitations are not moral failures but human conditions, and that your peace does not need to depend on them being different than they are. After 60, you have the wisdom, the weariness, and the accumulated life experience to do this not as a beginner, but as someone who has already been prepared by everything they've lived through. The ground was always there. You are simply, finally, ready to stand on it. Nothing that is going to be said after this will be more important than what you already know somewhere inside yourself. That peace isn't a reward for a life perfectly lived. It isn't waiting at the end of one more achievement or one more resolution. It is available right here, in this breath, in this moment, in the quiet that exists underneath every thought you've ever had. After 60, you don't need to rebuild from scratch. You need to recognize what was never lost. That recognition, gentle and honest, is where everything changes.